Broadcasting live on the UnitedWest.org AM radio network and simulcasting on DirecTV, iHeartRadio, Roku, and the World Wide Web, this is Enemies of the State with Tom Trento.
Okay. Checking out the Jerusalem Post here, Tom Trento, 4:05 in the afternoon, Tuesday, 16th of June. Look, you know, I don't say my name every 5 minutes, so remember it if you're listening. Right now, Tom Trento, pretty simple. WSBR Radio, Enemies of the State, name of the show. 740 on your dial. We're here every day, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, East Coast time, bringing you all kinds of information on this great country, this exceptional country, the United States of America, the exceptional people that are here, and the people we'd like to make an exception about and export them to some other place, because you have to have a certain amount, minimum amount of intelligence, is that it? Or wisdom, or spirituality, or how about commitment? A minimal amount of commitment to the principles of this country. Otherwise, what's this all about? So, for the next couple of weeks, as we look into the Iran issue, next week for a whole week, which will destabilize the Middle East one way or the other, either a long-term destabilization leading to nuclear war, or a short-term destabilization leading to stability in the Western civilizational part of the world.
Stop it!
Western.
No, Western.
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 It's the Western.
All right, when you have music, it's country and Western, right?
Western music.
I mean, who gave you permission to change the spelling of Western exactly?
Nuclear.
Western
Who gave
music.
you permission to change the spelling?
So all of that good stuff we do on this show. Today we got great stuff for you as always. We have President Bill Clinton. We have him in a few minutes. He's agreed to come on the show. We had to use CNN because we didn't have our cameraman out wherever he was, so we hired CNN for the day. Got a little interview with
Blew our annual budget.
With Bill Clinton. And we had to sign 50 papers where we owe him everything we ever do for the rest of our lives. And we have to vote for Hillary. Other than that. And then a little bit later, John Stemberger, attorney from the state of Florida, very active politically, social conservative, Christian social conservative, Florida Family Policy is his organization. He recently did a presentation, phenomenal PowerPoint presentation, analyzing the 78 candidates for the Republican position of president. Open seat, everybody runs. And a lot of people run not to become president, but to become the next thing they want to in their life because they ran for president of the United States. You'll hear John on that. But an excellent analysis, a very dispassionate analysis of the people so far. Yet yesterday, Jeb Bush actually announced, and I think yesterday, toward the end of the day, after showtime, another Floridian. That would bring it up to 5 people from Florida, 5 out of 18 or something.
You're running for president, Tom?
I may announce. The election is the 8th of November, 2016.
But you have to get into it before that.
I'm going to announce on the 7th.
You might win.
I want one vote to say, somebody voted for me.
I'm going to write you in.
There you go. Donald Trump is going to be announcing.
No way.
Or not announcing. He's being coy. He's
got a secret plan to end the Middle East conflict.
Yep, he's going to kill Pamela Geller.
I'll tell you what. He blew it on that, man. When he went after Pamela and us by implication.
He lost it. That's it. He's done.
Yep, he really is.
I mean, the only people...
And he doesn't understand this. I'm going to go to this camera because we're practicing some new stuff here in our phenomenal studio that we can't pay for. So something we need to practice very well. Actually, you need to practice taking out your checkbook. You don't even have to write a check. All you have to do is go to theunitedwest.org, Top right-hand side, it says donate securely. That means he can't be hacked. Nobody's going to get your numbers. It's very, very secure.
Is it
It's
working?
Encrypted. It is working now. We had 2 weeks of it not working. It's working now very, very well. Go there. Please make a monthly contribution as much as your budget allows. Lord knows we need it. We're doing phenomenal work here, but our revenue stream is more a revenue drip than a stream. And we can't go on forever without resources, so we do need your help. And those of you in a greater position to write larger checks, we need that help too. But right now we're going to go to the Middle East, from begging for money to the Middle East, to show you why we're begging for the money we need to help save America, Israel, and the West. Let's go over there. And then we'll look at whether or not the boys and girl, I think we got one lady so far, a lady that I liked quite a bit, Carly Farina, but I since heard at 12 minutes after Tom Trento, your host, Enemies of the State, WSBR Radio, theunitedwest.org, all things national security, all things Israel, all things America. I heard Carly Farina.
Fiorina.
Is it Fiorina?
Fiorina.
Hey, that's an Italian name, T. You got no
Fiorina.
reason to mess that one
Fiorina.
up.
I don't know if she's Italian, though. I don't, you know.
Yeah, she
I think she married some Italian guy, maybe. We'll see. But she really dropped the ball on the Islamic stuff right after 9/11. I have to check it. You know, when you go, oh, here's a speech she made. The speech was like, you know,
Whoa.
Neville Chamberlain made the speech, so I gotta double check it.
Wow.
All right, here we have the Middle East, and it's the middle of the East, the middle way between the East and West, Middle East, and it's very interesting because over in this part of Egypt over here, that continent. Remember we played that game once. Name the continent right here.
Yeah.
What continent
And
is
you're
that?
pointing at where, Tom, for our radio listening audience?
We're pointing to the northeast tip of Egypt, right by Israel, right by the Sinai before you get to Israel.
Yeah.
What continent is Egypt in?
Africa, Tom.
Africa.
Okay, then you throw a stone across the little waterway here. You're in another continent.
That's Asia, Tom.
Asia. Israel is in Asia, the continent of Asia. Most people don't know that. They think that it's in the Middle East, which is the continent of Asia.
And you're also really close to Europe right there.
Yeah, another stone's throw away from another continent. All these continents, it's amazing how there's so many of them. But look at Iran right here. We're looking at Iran. Starting the week of the 27th through the 22nd through the 26th, we will have a week on Iran, queuing up their decision, the decision of the P5+1, and finding out what this agreement's actually going to say. We know it's going to be bad. We know it's going to be bad. So Iran right here to the east of Iraq, Syria, Israel is a huge threat. They're looking down at Saudi Arabia over here. They want the two holy cities, Mecca and Medina, and they want in this area right over here, the northeast section, black gold, Texas tea. That's what they want right here. Iran's looking at the oil fields of the Sunni Saudis that they hate. There will never be peace at 14 minutes after the hour in the Middle East because the Sunnis and the Shia hate each other more than they love anything. There will always be instability.
Well, other than the Jews.
And yeah, and then if we go over to Israel, there's Syria. We have about 15 different terrorist organizations fighting there, half of which are on one side, the Sunni side. The others are on the Iranian side, the Shia side. Now they're drawing in Lebanon, which is to the north of Israel. Israel's surrounded by warring factions in its north, Hezbollah, Lebanon. Over to the northeast, parts of Syria, you have the Islamic State, plus about, like I said, 10, 12 other terrorist organizations, all of whom hate Israel. Come down to Jordan. There's stability with Jordan around Israel right now, but it's artificial stability because Israel is stabilizing Jordan. 3 million people, 1 million refugees from Syria, 1 million Muslim brother, and 1 million that support King Hussein there. Going down to Egypt, We have a little bit of stability there, not in the population of 80 million, because the population in Egypt hates Jews. They're Jew haters. Many of them are Muslim Brotherhood lovers. But al-Sisi realizes that he's got to have a strong man hand, just like Mubarak did on his people, and he's got to maintain a relationship with Israel for his own self-interests. He's even working with the Saudis now. The Saudis are just fat, overweight, completely useless sheikhs who roll around in the splendor of their gold Rolls Royces and their trips to Monte Carlo, protected by the United States and Israel. And now they're starting to say, oh, what are we to do? What are we to do? So we got a real mess down there. Iran has gone down into Yemen down here with the Houthis, trying to circle around the Saudis. The whole place is insane. We're going to listen to Bill Clinton now talk about the candidates for the Republican presidential race 510 days from today. Did you know that, folks? 510 days from today is the election. It's going to go very, very fast. And whoever gets elected out of the folks you're going to see must understand what's going on in the Middle East, and not just intellectually, must have a visceral understanding and must have the cojones to do what needs to be done. And the way I grew up in my neighborhood, where that make-believe movie The Sopranos was eventually made in my neighborhood, believe it or not, people either loved you or they feared you. Those were basically the two things. They either love you or they fear you. And sort of a midway point is respect. They don't have to, if you don't have to engender fear as long as they respect you. You hope people love you. You try to do what's right and people will love you, but people who like to do what's wrong will hate that which is right. So then they better fear you or at least respect you. This administration, no one loves them except the hard left, because they basically view him as Santa Claus. So right now, no one loves in the world stage America. Then they better fear us. If they don't fear us, they at least got to respect us. Ain't happening.
How about none of the above, Tom?
None of the above. Well, the new guy has to engender, has to bring a personality on the global stage that people either love, fear, or respect. Let's take a look at what Bill Clinton says.
Size up the Republican field. What do you like? What do you not like? What do you think is going on there?
Well, there's a lot of them. It looks more like the Kentucky Derby than Belmont. and I like that horse, American Pharaoh. That was amazing. It's a pretty, and they believe what they believe. They still believe trickle-down economics and works better than investment. And their convictions are so great that they're undeterred by evidence. And that's always amazing to me. But they're impressive, and they have some differences of opinion on, like, the national security issues and the incarceration issues and all that. It'll be interesting to watch them debate. I sympathize with the question of how the primary voters are going to decide who to vote for and whether it's fair or unfair for some people to be eliminated from the televised debates. I don't know how you listen to 12 people in a televised debate, but...
Or 16.
Yeah, or however many they got. But here's what I think, that generally Republican primary voters, since you and I have been doing this, wind up voting for the person they think has the best chance to win. In spite of because they figure the Tea Party's taken over the House. They've got all their ideological dreams fulfilled. So the reason I'm saying this is it may be harder this year than before to figure out who's the most electable candidate. Mm. But I predict that at some point during this process, whatever they're debating and whatever the stories are, there'll be a move by people who think they can influence the process to settle on the one that's most electable, because they figure they already got what they need. They got the Congress, and they just want to win the White House so bad they can, I get that. I mean, I understand that. But that's what
Why does he
makes
sound like
it
he's
for an
crying?
outsider who doesn't understand all the ins and outs of it. It'll make it difficult to predict. Because I think they don't know. Do they need somebody who's new? Do they need somebody who's seasoned? Do they need somebody who's got a forward-leaning position on immigration, or will it disillusion their people and stay home? Do they need all this kind? They got all these decisions to make. But in the end, it's going to come down to who's the most electable candidate, because they want to win.
Mr. President, thank you so much for your time. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Jay.
it. It's been a really nice interview.
Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
I love watching me on television, man. I just love watching me on TV.
You look a little pale, Bill.
I'm so smart. I'm so smart. Oh, man, see how smart I look.
sound a little whiny sometimes.
I think the ladies still like me, though. I'm still a pretty good-looking guy. You gotta admit. Yeah, he's good. Oh, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of that thing. We will be using this in the near future, for sure. Interesting analysis, very interesting analysis. Look, these guys got the Congress, and now they got to figure out how to get the second branch of government in order not to lose the third branch. Everybody's forgetting that. Everybody's forgetting if Hillary wins, then she gets to pick the third branch's continuation. Yeah, the Senate has to approve, but we've seen the Senate do some stupid stuff. So in order to preserve the third branch, which many hold to, particularly when it's unbalanced as it is now, you get one or two more lefties in the Supreme Court, and we're done for as a culture. We are done for. We will become a second-rate, socialistic, European, skinny smoking cigarette, parfait-eating place living, retiring at 40 years old on the taxes of a few rich people who take their money and go someplace else. That's what is happening in the European countries. But Bill Clinton had some very, very good points. Now, take what he said as the overview. These guys have the Congress. They've got to find somebody who's the most electable, and I'll counter that with, was Barack Obama electable at some point? Now, let's listen to John Stemberger, and we'll stop a couple of times through this to comment on it. But it's an excellent presentation on the people that Bill Clinton just spoke about. We're doing this, folks, because there's 510 days left. Everybody's trying to figure out what horse are they going to ride for the next 510 days, and what does that horse have to look like, and what does he eat, and what does he smell like? We're not totally all sure right here at the United West. We're looking for somebody to walk out of, General Patton or Eisenhower or Winston Churchill or one of these great iconic military leaders to come in at a time when military leadership is so vital. But we don't see that on the horizon. But here's what we do see. Take a look.
Let's talk about political power. Ultimately, political power is votes. But there's different ways that you can create political power or translate or transfer political power. Money is an obvious way. Think about Governor Rick Scott if he didn't have his wealth. It would be very difficult for him to get the kind of oxygen that he did to defeat Bill McCollum and even to defeat Charlie Crist. Very significant. Number two is human factors. Where would Barack Obama be without his charisma? He would not have won Iowa. He would not have beat Hillary Clinton. Barack Obama is all about charisma. That translates into political power. Likability, beauty, charm. Look, Mitt Romney is a tall, dark, and handsome guy. That means something. I noticed that there were midlife crisis, middle-aged women all over the United States that love Mitt Romney and working for him. Sarah Palin is a striking woman. That gives her political influence and power. Dynamic communication skills. Again, you think about a candidate like Bill Clinton was just an amazing communicator, as is Barack Obama as well. And again, that's something that's significant. Grassroots networks are important. These also can be translated into political power. Think about a candidate like Pat Robertson, who had basically a huge network of people all over when he ran for president. Dan Webster had homeschoolers from all over, so he had a grassroots network built in. A command of the issues or experts in public policy. Newt Gingrich This is where Newt, every time Newt spoke, he was the smartest guy in the room, right? And that translates into political power. Marco Rubio is showing that he actually has a very good command of foreign policy, and so that's something that's kind of characterizing his candidacy. Strong character and reputation. Okay, just that alone can mean quite a bit. I think of Dan Webster here again, a person that just has a strong character and a strong reputation. Ben Carson is a doctor, a physician. He had the guts to confront President Obama during the presidential prayer breakfast. So that says something about his character, and that's giving him a lot of his reputation. His character is kind of propelling him. Okay, he's not necessarily a dynamic communicator, doesn't have a lot of money, but he has something, and that's compelling him. And then name recognition. This can be a double-edged sword. Obviously, Jeb Bush, his name is immediately recognized, but it's also, the question is whether that's a positive or a negative. So all of these things can translate into votes. And so when you think about the candidates, think about which candidates have these factors. The more factors you have, the more likely it is that you'll be influential, the less that you do. Now, what's different this time, first of all, the biggest difference is Citizens United. The United States Supreme Court ruled that to limit contributions was actually a limitation on free speech several years ago, and as a result of that, the creation of super PACs has occurred. Now, this is actually a good thing, in my opinion, because it breaks the monopoly that the establishment had on money. Okay, on one hand. On the other hand, if you have one major donor and a super PAC, you're not going to see candidates, in my opinion, dropping out after South Carolina because they don't have money. Because one millionaire, one billionaire can fund your campaign through the entire primary. Okay, so I think that it's very possible because of this, you're going to see perhaps even a brokered convention. You'll see many candidates go all the way through. So the candidate that can capture a plurality of votes could control the process all the way through. And so that's a very significant thing, especially when you have 9, 10, or more candidates. We have a very split electorate. So the money is going to be very different. We're going to see, again, big millionaires playing the game and keeping alive for long periods of time. I would submit to you this is better than just the establishment candidate having a monopoly and only that person having, if you had to compare the two models, I think what we have now is better, and I think the Supreme Court was right that this is a form of speech in a way. Number two is momentums, front-end loading. There's not going to be the same front-end loading on the elections. Iowa and New Hampshire, South Carolina, they're not going to have as much influence as they have before. You could argue that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's just a matter of a fact. Also, after March 15th, it'll be winner take all for the primaries. This is something Florida just did. We just switched to that, did we not, Representative? And so, again, some argue that this was because we have two big candidates in Florida, and we want them to be very significant. So it'll be winner take all and not proportional. And again, more possibility to have a brokered convention. More and more observers are saying this could actually be a possibility if there is no clear winner because of the diversity of candidates that are there. So these are all the candidates, not all of them. There's one there that's not supposed to be a part. This is the best picture I could find, though, to put them all nicely up there. So here is what we're going to do. I'm going to analyze each of these candidates, and I'm going to take them. Real Clear Politics has a poll, and this is a compilation of polls. So they take all the polling nationwide, and they average it, and so you can see on the top, so this is the order that I'm going to analyze the candidates. This means absolutely nothing, by the way. You may find Bush completely out of the race in 6 months. You may find Walker at 5th place. So this is meaningless. I'm just trying to figure out some fair way to do this. Also, as we teeter off toward the end, I can't spend the same amount of time as I will on the front runners just because of the fact that we would be here all night. There's that many candidates. There's candidates getting in that are not even up here that'll get in very soon. So, Governor Jeb Bush. I think Governor Bush's strengths, by the way, he's not a candidate actually at this time. He has an exploratory committee. It's indicated that he'll announce by the end of June. But obviously, he will probably raise the most money, possibly. It looks like Rubio could actually outdo him, as you'll see in a moment. But he has very powerful name identification, probably more than anyone else, which is both a plus and a minus, depending on who you are and how you view the two former President Bushes. He obviously has strong GOP establishment support, but even that, I think, is undermined some. It's not as clear as he would have thought that it would be, and I think people are not just falling over and supporting Jeb because of his brother and his father. Winning Florida is critical, so the fact that he's in Florida is very significant in terms of one of his strengths as a candidate. Also, very strong executive experience. If you were here when he was governor, he was a very strong governor. He governed as a very conservative governor. One of the things that was different is the three issues that are kind of dogging him right now really weren't hot issues in the 8 years he governed. So Common Core wasn't around. You didn't have immigration in the same intensity that it is now. And you also didn't have the marriage debate. The marriage debate was just starting up as he was getting out of office. And so all three of those issues are kind of have him now in a difficult place, three of which he didn't have when he was governor of the state of Florida. But he was very strongly pro-life. And remember, this is the governor that said, hey, we're thinking about sending the Florida Department of Law Enforcement down to face off against the sheriff during the Terry Schiavo case. When the sheriff said, no, take the plugs out, governor said, no, we want the plugs back in. You literally had the possibilities of two law enforcement officers armed facing off with each other. This takes a certain amount of chutzpah. So on the pro-life issue, I think Governor Bush has been very, very strong, and it'd be hard to question his credentials on that issues. Obviously, speaks perfect Spanish, and so that's very a key thing. In the general election, the Hispanic vote will be, could be even a decisive thing in this election. So it's very, very important that he is, has Hispanic connections. And he will also benefit, I believe, from the fractured conservative vote. And in my opinion, frankly, I'll just give you my opinion here, I think that it's very possible Jeb can win if all the conservatives stay fractured. If the conservatives begin to come to a cohesive place where they can begin to come to a consensus around a candidate, it's very possible they could edge him out. But I think without that, then it's possible he could also die out as well. So there's two scenarios there. He could just lack the support necessary, or he could end up being the nomination if the conservative candidates tend to be split. He would be viewed as one of the more viable moderate candidates at this time. Whether that's an accurate perception or not is another story, but that's really the thing. So his weaknesses are his name, again, Bush fatigue. A lot of people say that, but you got to balance that against the fact that, look, he's going up against the Clinton dynasty as well. So it's not as if, you know, if you got a Bush dynasty or a Clinton dynasty, you kind of pick your poison, and so it's not the same thing, I think, against Hillary Clinton. And obviously, Common Core, I think, and amnesty is his two biggest weaknesses as a matter of issues. I'm not going to rehearse the issues of every single candidate. I'll just point out where they have a difference that's very significant than the Republican platform. Till recently, he was not a player in Iowa, but he has been there. I think he's there now, actually. And in recent interviews, he said he plans to at least be, you know, better than 5th place. We'll see what happens there. But I know some other candidates are running very strong in Iowa right now as well. He is perceived as the most moderate candidate, and he's not a great communicator. He's a solid communicator, but he's not a dynamic communicator like others in the race. Next is Scott Walker, the current governor of Wisconsin. Scott Walker's strengths are he has executive experience. He has won several tough elections and recount elections, running very strong in Iowa right now is also a strength. He is tough as nails. Many of you know the battle he went with the unions in Wisconsin and just did not back down, literally almost riots in the legislature because of his collective bargaining stand, and has just been a very strong, at least economic conservative in that regard. He's seen as a sleeper candidate that could win and could sneak up on everyone. A lot of people think that there's a real debate about whether he's a social conservative or not. I actually know the lady that does my job in Wisconsin, and at times he's been strong, and at times he's run away from issues as well. So clearly he's not going to be a leader on social conservative issues, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people think he's viable. They think he could do better in the general election because of that. Some think he can get all three of the Republican coalition. He can get the establishment, the Tea Party, and social conservatives together, and would view him as a viable candidate because of that. His weaknesses, as I said before, he's been hot and cold on social issues. Just recently, he was threatening to veto pro-life legislation, and he's been back and forth. He didn't fill out the voter guide of the Wisconsin Family Council, and then wrote a letter instead. So he's kind of been hot and cold on social issues. He's not very well known nationwide. Unless you're studying politics and following it, he's really not a guy that has a great name ID. Can he raise the money? The Koch brothers, I've said initially they would support him. They immediately backed off of that, though. And they said they were more likely going to support almost every candidate.
Scott's
with some
well,
funding.
A bunch of these guys are Grover guys.
So if they do get behind him, that'll be very, very significant. These
we'll
gentlemen
have to
are worth
add that in
over
when we
$100 billion,
talk.
and they are major political players. So if the Koch brothers get behind Scott Walker, that's going to be a very significant thing, economically speaking. If they spread their money out amongst everyone and be more fair with it, then it may not have been. Plus or minuses, he dropped out of college and never finished it. Some people say this is good, makes him more like Joe Lunchbucket. Other people say, well, he's really not that educated. And in fact, in foreign policy, he's actually not very good with foreign policy. He's recently had to do a lot of studying just to get up to speed because he made some embarrassing statements about what was the greatest foreign policy achievement of the Reagan administration, and he talked about the strike with the air traffic controllers, which is really a domestic issue, not a foreign policy issue. Some would also argue his personality is lacking, not necessarily dynamic, just a very strong leader, and he's never run in a national campaign. Next is Senator Marco Rubio from here in Florida. I think that Rubio is the best communicator in American politics. He's really remarkable. He can speak without notes. He's doesn't need a teleprompter like Barack Obama, and he's actually better without notes than he is with notes, which is a remarkable thing. His command of foreign policy is really stunning when you listen to him. He's probably better than any candidate. It's almost as if he's been reading State Department intelligence briefings all night long because he knows every single fact. I often wonder if he has a photographic memory. He has appealed to several mega donors. Several billionaires are interested in Rubio right now. They've not committed, but they've indicated publicly that they're interested in supporting him. He's also viewed as the heir apparent to the establishment vote if Bush were to falter. That's widely rumored in a lot of the literature and the news articles. He would bring Florida if he was the nominee, which is important. He's strongly against Common Core and strongly in favor of Israel. He also has the unique ability, I think, to both win the primary and potentially win the general election, because in the primary he could attract evangelicals. He himself is Catholic, by the way, goes to Mass across from the Senate, and then goes to an evangelical church with his wife when he's back in Miami at home on Sundays. And he also speaks Spanish fluently, and I think he would attract young people and perhaps even women, even more than Hillary Clinton would in the general election. His weaknesses are immigration, amnesty, Gang of Eight. I would put this down 3 times. If it wasn't for this issue, I think he would be the front runner right now, frankly, clearly against everybody else. But that has been probably his greatest weakness, as when he attempted to have comprehensive immigration reform and formed the coalition with Democrats, which the Tea Party really viewed as a betrayal of his previous position.
It was all due to
Some
Grover,
perceive he's
but-
not old enough. Certainly JFK was the same age as Marco Rubio as this time, and so that could be overcome when you actually hear him speak. There is a lot of competition for the conservative vote. Cruz is running very strong in the Tea Party and other places, and so again, he's got a lot of competition for the conservative vote. And also, being the establishment candidate could be a negative thing, especially the Tea Party could view as a negative instead of a positive if the establishment did support him. Senator Rand Paul is probably one of the most interesting candidates and different candidates of all. His strengths are he's running very strongly right now in Iowa. Been spending a lot of time there, and just from the people I'm talking to on the ground in Iowa, it seems to be very strong. Him and Ted Cruz and Huckabee, the 3 of them together. He is very smart. I listened to 2 hours of him give a lecture with his wife, and he was just fascinating. His ability to integrate medicine and law and history. I mean, he was really very articulate, had very low expectations, came out very, very impressed with Rand Paul. His greatest, we'll go on to weaknesses in a second, but he's very smart and a very compelling speaker. He's willing to be bold and kind of challenge new ideas and challenge the establishment. He has a youthful appearance, and I think he has a youthful following as well, and also will inherit the loyal libertarian following of his father, Ron Paul. And he hired Rick Santorum's campaign manager, who has some experience with these things. His weakness is he's wrong on marriage from the standpoint of the Republican Party. He's given several opportunities to articulate why the state has a compelling interest in the institution of marriage and family, and just completely falls flat, thinks it's not an issue, thinks that marriage should be privatized, which could cause a lot of problems. And many conservatives disagree on his foreign policy issue. He's not a neoconservative, does not believe in that we should be a global leader around, and so he's criticized by a lot of hawks for that as well. Also, he's perceived as being weak in his support for Israel as well. I will tell you that I was actually invited to go to Israel with Rand Paul, which I did not go to, but he took 100 pastors with him. It was a larger group that was funded by some donors, but he went to Israel personally with a number of pastors from around the country to try to at least more understand why Israel is important as an issue. He does favor many traditional libertarian positions, including permissive drug laws, which I would view as a negative from a policy standpoint. And he really doesn't appeal to any of the three major coalitions as a libertarian, so he could get a little bit of each in that. And his father, Ron Paul, continues to write and speak and say things that are way far out, which I won't go into, but those tend to stick back on him when that happens, and so that's a negative as well. Governor Mike Huckabee, the folksy candidate from executive experience, was governor of Arkansas for many years. Really, really tough elections he won, and governed in a Democratic state with a Democratic legislature, has some of the highest favorable ratings. So when you ask who's likable, his kind of folksy charm, he has a real way about him as a person, and that's a very powerful thing. He's also been on national television for several years. Remember Reagan, when he lost the first time, he went on radio and just spent several years honing his message. Huckabee has done the same thing, honing his message, inviting people from all political spectrums on his show, and really has become an artful communicator and a great personality. He's won Iowa previously, and so that's something that's a positive, but now he's not kind of doing as well in Iowa as he did before because Santorum won Iowa last time, and so it's been a while. It's possible that if all the evangelical go, in which some people say is between 20 to 50% of the primary vote, he could really have that winning. Evangelicals are a little bit more sophisticated nowadays. They're not just going, oh, we're going to vote for the preacher. They're looking at all the issues, and because of that, he's going to have to work for the evangelical support. It's not just going to automatically be there. He is a great communicator. I would say after Rubio, he's the second best communicator in the Republican Party. He's funny, he's affable, plain spoken, he's creative in his answers, doesn't shy away from difficult answers. He's been a pastor, a radio guy, and so he really knows how to handle people and how to handle difficult subjects. He also has a lot of strength. I think he has a lot of crossover appeal for a general election. This is a governor, as a Republican, captured 48% of the black vote in Arkansas. That's a big deal. You capture 48% of the black vote in any typical election, you stole the election. You've taken away a major part of the coalition the Democrats need to win. And if he could do that and recreate that on a national scale, that would be very significant. He also has the potential of bringing Southern Democrats, kind of your Bo Weevil, Southern conservative Democrats to the table as well. And he's battled the Clinton machine before, which he kind of knows how they work. So those are all the strengths. The big question for Governor Huckabee is, can he raise the money? That's a very significant thing, as we'll see in a moment. There's lots of competition for evangelical voters, as I said before. Common Core as an issue is probably his biggest Achilles heel. This is probably his biggest weakness from a policy standpoint. He's been criticized so much that he's actually backed off and now says he doesn't support it anymore because of that. But he was a part, along with Governor Bobby Jindal and Jeb Bush, the whole Council of Republican Governors, they kind of came up with the idea of Common Core. So even Jindal, who now is very much against Common Core, there's the issue of what it was supposed to be versus what it ended up being now as well. Some perceive Huckabee also to be a moderate or a statist, and he's heavily opposed by the Club for Growth and anti-tax groups, which is something that is not a good thing for him. Then Senator Ted Cruz. Senator Ted Cruz right now is running very strong in a lot of circles, especially the Tea Party. If there was one candidate, I think the Tea Party, it looks like there's a consensus within the Tea Party at least, and you'll get the expert opinion from others here, but it seems to be a lot of Tea Party supporters that like Ted Cruz. He got 100% of the American Conservative Union rating for his voting record. He's strong in Texas, much stronger than Rick Perry is. I think in terms of most of the movement conservatives in Texas, most of the ones that I know in Texas are supporting Cruz and not Rick Perry anymore. He's got a very strong money start. He raised $31 million in the first couple of weeks of his race. Whether he can sustain that, you'll need at least $2 million to just get through the whole process. Okay, so that's a great start, but the question is, can he continue to do that? He's a very strong conservative, and he's unapologetic. When he's asked about marriage, he's very straightforward. He doesn't mix his words, and he's very strong. He also has strong support in Iowa, and most of his staff are Newt Gingrich's staff. Rick Tyler, Maria Zack, some of the folks that he's hired, all of those people were Newt Gingrich staffers. Ted Cruz's weaknesses, he has the highest negatives of any candidate. Okay, so when you ask people after he speaks, he just has a high negative when Joe Lunchbucket hears him talk. Sometimes he can come off sarcastic and insincere. I've heard him speak and been in his presence at least 3 or 4 times. A lot of bashing Obama, which I'm a red meat conservative. That's fine with me. But when you're trying to catch America, when you're trying to create a vision to capture people who are not conservatives, you really need a vision for America that's wider than just kind of being very negative. And so I think that's a negative. So his crossover appeal, is not good. He probably has the least crossover appeal of any candidate. So again, you have to win the primary, but you also have to win the general election as well. I think he'll have a tough time building a broad-based coalition in the general election. That's going to be a weakness. Hispanic leaders, actually, even though he is Cuban and speaks Spanish, do not like him because he's very strong in the immigration position. So all of the leaders, Sammy Rodriguez and Mark Gonzalez, all the national Latino leaders, even here in Florida, they really do not like Ted Cruz for that reason. He doesn't inspire and cast vision. He did actually, when he had his announcement video did exactly what he needs to do, so he's kind of learning from his mistakes. He is casting vision now. But he also had dual citizenship as a Canadian and a United States citizen, but he disavowed himself of that Canadian citizenship. I don't know if that's going to be an issue, but some believe that it could be. And he's not well known outside of Texas. I've talked to a lot of people who said Ted Cruz, and they've said Ted Cruz who? Ben Carson. Ben Carson is a very exciting candidate for a number of reasons. He's extremely popular. Out of the 38 policy councils around the country, Ben Carson has been the number one speaker at our dinners that we have. Some of you have been to our dinners. Ben Carson has been the number one speaker, and he's very popular for that. He's also not been a career politician, which is good. But when it comes to the President of the United States, people really say that, oh, we don't want a career politician. But when it comes to the President, they usually vote for somebody that has some experience, especially executive experience. But he is viewed as very courageous. His whole thing is, I'm not going to be politically correct. That's kind of his mantra. He has a very appealing personal story. He came from very simple means and worked up to be one of the world's foremost surgeons, and really has a very compelling story. And many love the idea of a black conservative in the White House, especially after having Barack Obama in the White House. So for all these reasons, Ben Carson is a very popular candidate. His weaknesses are, he's in office, he's a novice to the political world, which was evident. He's made several major mistakes in just saying, I think he said recently, oh, gays choose to be gay or something like that, which was inartful the way that he said it. There's a better way to say that. But then he came out with a full-blown apology instead of an actual articulation of the actual issue itself. And so it was scripted. It looked like his political handlers had did it, and it was very embarrassing, both on the left and the right. And so again, this is a part of not knowing how the political world works and how to navigate these stories. He did raise about $11 million, but he spent most of it. So the question is, who's going to really support him? He has no real mega donor, no billionaire that's going to fund him. He had made some statements that would seem that he could be weak on the Second Amendment. And then also we talked about the awkward statement. Governor Chris Christie. The governor, you got to love this guy, right? Boo! So, Chris Christie, he's very likable, he's very unique, right? He's got the soprano thing going, he's got the big boy thing going, he's very blunt. You like that. We like somebody that's going to punch back the media and say, hey, you take it somewhere. We like that about Chris Christie, right? He's willing to stand up against the establishment, he's willing to stand up against the media.
But not against Islam.
He's also perceived as one of the more moderate Republicans. So the theory is if he could win the primary, that he would be a shoo-in the general election. I don't know that I agree with that, but that's some of the more conventional wisdom with Chris Christie. But on the issues, this is where it really goes wrong. He's for gun control. He's for gay marriage. He's a big global warming guy and a big environmentalist guy. For casino gambling.
He's a Democrat.
He's appointed Islamic judges, which may not be a bad thing in of itself, but the way he defended Islam was just really showed his lack of understanding about the threat. This was several years ago before ISIS. A lot of people now understand the threat is very, very real as a result of what we're seeing, not just in our own country, but around the world. The Bridgegate scandal that he had, and also his two top former aides were indicted. He does have one major funder, but it's a real question mark as to whether or not he'll get in. It'll be interesting to see if he does. Governor Rick Perry, I will tell you I was co-chairman of his campaign along with Speaker of the House Dean Cannon when he ran, and I was there. I'll tell you that part in a second, but he has strong executive experience. He was a great governor of Texas, and he was very bold, very conservative on life and marriage, on economic, on taxes. He was a great governor, and he made Texas to be the #1 job state in the country. and so that's a big deal. Texas is a big deal, but the caveat there is he's not running as strong in Texas. Most of the people that were supporting him before, David Barton, some of the big high-profile leaders, Kelly Shackelford, who used to do what I do in Texas, they're not necessarily supporting him this time, so he's going to have a real tough time getting oxygen. His weaknesses are his prior failures, and I was there in Orlando when Scott Plakin and others were taking off their Perry stickers and said, sorry, John, I recruited them all, but they said, I can't do it, and they walked out, and because it was very embarrassing what happened. He actually had just had surgery, and he was actually on back medication. One wonders whether his performance would have been better had he not been medicated and had all that going on merely weeks before those debates. Can he raise the money? He does not have any billionaires in his back pocket. Many argues he has skeleton in his closets, and I won't go into that. You can just type it and figure it out. But most of his stronger supporters are not around then. And he's also chosen very liberal operatives that can't stand people like us in this room to work for his campaign. And that's something we are, at a national level, we are really strong with Mort Blackwell's law, personnel is policy. If you're going to hire people that work for your administration that can't stand us and won't give us access, then that doesn't cut it. And so when we're interviewing these guys and we're talking to them, we're saying we want to know who you're hiring, we want to know who the true conservatives are, and we want to know if you're hiring gay activists. Even I don't care, but it's are you hostile? Are you an activist? Or are you going to give access and actually advise conservatively on issues? That's Rick Perry. Senator Rick Santorum, I'll confess to you that I also, after Perry kind of lived and died, then I supported Santorum last time as well. He's a solid social conservative, a very committed Catholic, pro-life, has a number of children, been through the process before, won Iowa, and so he knows the ins and outs of having to meet with 4 and 5 people at a time in Iowa. It's a grueling process. He's tenacious and persistent. He is way behind in the polls. But Santorum's a guy who just says, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to keep going, right? I'm going to keep going. He's like, I think 2% or something in the polls right now. But look, I was in a room with national leaders, and Dr. Dobson and a guy named Bob Vanderplaat, who's from Ohio, said, I think we were all talking about Rick Perry versus Newt Gingrich and, and he said, I think we should support Santorum. And I said, there's no way you're going to get oxygen. You can't bring him from 1%. And sure enough, they did. They brought him literally from 1% in Iowa, and he won the entire thing. This just shows you the organizational prowess of my counterpart in Iowa, Bob Vanderplaat, who's a very, very powerful and very seasoned politician. He has a major donor in Foster Freeze, who made his money in insurance. Foster Freeze, I think, is worth, I don't know, $100 million or something, and so he's supporting Rick Santorum. The weaknesses are, the reason he won Iowa, in my opinion, is because there was a consensus in our movement that he was the true social conservative, and that's why he got the oxygen he did. Had there been 8 other people in the race like there is now, I mean, before you had kind of Bachmann, she went up and went down. It was like, Herman Cain went up and then went down, and Rick Perry went up and then down. And so Santorum was the one left standing. He's hoping that's what's going to happen now. Carly Fiorina is actually extremely impressive. I actually met her in Washington, D.C. this past weekend, and you don't expect much out of her. When you hear her speak, you're like, wow. She's very impressive. She's a very seasoned speaker. She's very articulate. And it's kind of, she has a way of balancing the strength. She's strong, but she's not like, she doesn't come off in a bad way. And that's very important, I think, for a woman to navigate those waters, because that can come off wrong. She's very confident. She's a fresh voice. She's a very clear, she's very articulate. You saw the Katie Couric interview. It wasn't like Sarah Palin this time. I mean, she really handled Katie Couric and put her on the defensive the whole interview. And so she's very impressive. Again, not a career politician. Many see her as the anti-Hillary Clinton candidate, to just basically say things that perhaps men can't say against a woman candidate. We'll see how she does. It seems unlikely that she could really catch oxygen because of the fact she's never run for office before, perceived as a non-viable candidate, and has really no major money. Governor Bobby Jindal is the governor of Louisiana. Interesting to see an Indian person, but speak like you're from Louisiana. It's a very different mix. He's a very good campaigner. He has an exploratory committee and will decide by June 1st. Solid conservative guy, very strong Catholic, was previously an evangelical that converted to Catholicism. I think that because he's a person of color and has a youthful appearance, I think that could bode very well. He might be able to get the black vote and maybe some young people. He just has a kind of a way that's has a youthful appeal, I think. He's from a southern state and is a great campaigner. I mean, he is a guy that when he talked to him, he literally looks everyone in the eye. And so he has this way of making you feel like you're like right there and he's talking to you. He's a very good, his communication skills are hit and miss in terms of weakness. Many of you remember his State of the Union address he gave. It was awful. And since then, everyone said, oh, Bobby Jindal is not going to be viable now. But sometimes he's very good. Sometimes he's not so good, and he's just hit and miss. Can he raise the money is the big question. He's not very well known, very low in the polls right now as well. Honorable mentions in this process, Senator Lindsey Graham, who will announce by June 1st, recently said he was announcing because he felt like the world was out of control. Glad he just made that observation now. We've been observing that for some time now, actually, Senator. Ohio Governor John Kasich, I know for a fact, opposes everything that we stand for as an organization, so I have very little interest in him. It remains to be seen. He hasn't really indicated whether he's going to announce or not, but his name is out there. And then New York Governor George Pataki will announce May 28th. Now, let's talk about the billionaires out there and who has them. Bush has Woody Johnson of the Johnson & Johnson Company. He's worth $1.3 billion. Bush says he will raise $100 million by the end of May, and I think he's almost there right now. He clearly had the most impressive start, obviously because of his father and his brother will have significant backing. But Scott Walker has the Koch brothers behind him, again, worth $100 billion. Can you say $100 billion with me? It's crazy. Think about owning $100 billion. And so they said that we will commit $900 million to the race. Again, initially they backed off of Walker and they said, no, we're thinking about maybe splitting it between all the candidates. They're actually going to do an interview of all these guys and figure out which one they're going to support, which is fascinating. Wouldn't you love to be in that room? Rubio has four billionaires that are either committed to him or saying they're going to commit to him. So again, he should have no problem raising money along the lines of Bush and or Walker if he decides to do that.
Adelson.
Can anyone throw us a
Rand
sliver
Paul,
of a bone, a
has
splinter
fellow
of a
named Peter
bone?
Thiel, who is worth $2.2 billion. He was a big backer of Ron Paul. I believe he made his money in cars, and so that's Paul's kind of guy to get through in the super PACs. Huckabee, there's a fellow named Ronnie Cameron who's given millions of dollars to conservative that said he would also give to Huckabee. Huckabee announced when he announced just last week that he would raise $60 million in the early stages of his campaign. That's going to be really a do or die moment for him. I know a lot of us movement conservatives that do grassroots think that money's nothing. It is something. It's not everything, but it's very significant, especially when you're playing at this level. And because TV is just, you can't walk precincts as well in a national presidential campaign as you can in a local House race. And then Ted Cruz has Robert Mercer worth $100 million and has created 4 super PACs, and he's raised, as I said, $31 million to date.
Well,
we already went through this in 2012 with those billions and billions of wasted dollars.
And it's only going to be bigger this time.
it's only going to get bigger. Yep.
All right, well, that's essentially our show for today. Good overview of the candidates. And John's Stemberger, who's a dear friend of ours, his goal wasn't to go through all the various issues. He says those issues are out there. He was going more at the personality, the individual strengths and weaknesses, and the money behind them. Because, as you can see, when you got a billionaire behind you, they can now, because of the citizens' decision of the Supreme Court, billions of dollars can come to you through these other entities. You can compete at you know what? The ad buyers and the TV consultants
just having a field day.
Are just going, honey, we is going to Europe this year.
Think about the money Hillary's already got.
Unbelievable.
Well, what I'm afraid of, Tom, my biggest fear is that you're going to have this conservative vote split up, and then you're going to have someone like Jeb Bush, take it all, just like happened last time when the conservative vote was split up.
And we're going to go nowhere moving the country forward. It's going to be more stagnation and ridiculousness. All right, in any event, tomorrow, Wednesday, we have, what are we doing on Wednesday? I said it earlier. Oh, we have Israel. We're going to Israel to go find out what's going on in that country. I mean, these billionaires have more net worth than I think the whole country of Israel. See you tomorrow, everybody. And we have one of them is going to be the president of the United States, most likely.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.